to the show. This is The Force Always. My name is Diz, aka David Zaman. Let's go on with the news, the views, the reviews, and interviews. So let's hear some of the news. 24 hours away to more Shadow Lord coming onto Disney Plus. That's right, less than 24 hours now to more Shadow Lord on Disney Plus. Check it out. I will be doing follow-ups, either reactions, reviews, whatever you want to call it, shortly after the show. Just depends on my whereabouts at that point. But yeah, so that's now less than 24 hours away. And some people have seen it already in San Francisco in a special viewing event. And the reviews from there, well, you can look it up online if you don't want to get any spoilers. No real spoilers in the reviews, but more, if it's positive or negative. But you can check it out. It was in San Francisco. It was a preview to more Shadow Lord. Check that out somewhere online. Anyway, to more news. On YouTube, actually a great documentary which sort of gives us the similar understanding to, if you've ever seen the documentary Empire of Dreams, which is an absolutely great documentary. It goes through the whole original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6. That's episodes 4, 5, and 6. But there is this new documentary that sort of goes through similar type of events in Empire of Dreams documentary, and it's called Would Star Wars Exist Without Marshall Lucas? Icons Unearth Star Wars. And that's the title you'd look up on YouTube. Would Star Wars Exist Without Marshall Lucas? Icons Unearthed. More about my review on this particular documentary in my reviews section coming up. And to more news as I sort of scroll through the news that I've got coming up. Yes, we've also got something else on YouTube. It was sort of like a round table type of thing. It was aired about 4 or 5 days ago now. It has, goodness gracious, the three main people in this particular movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu. In fact, 4. There's, Grogu is in it, which I can remember his name. But there is Jon Favreau, which is one. Jon Favreau, the guy who plays bloody The Mandalorian. I can't think of his name right now. My goodness. He's in it. And also Sigourney Weaver is in this sort of roundtable thing, giving a sort of a hyped up preview, sort of a roundtable sort of thing of what to possibly expect for Mandalorian and Grogu. And that is making the rounds on YouTube. Maybe check it out. It's sort of something sweet and short to check out. And to more and final news, going back to more Shadow Lord, I've been scouring the internet and also Disney Plus. No actual advertising is happening on Disney Plus itself, especially the Australian leg of it, because I'm from Australia. I'm coming, this is where The Force Always comes from, Melbourne, Australia, to be precise. And there's no actual anything in the timeline, anything in its animation, anything in its original sort of setup, in its layout on Disney Plus as yet. But yeah, so we're interesting what time it actually drops. It has been said that it's going to be 5 p.m. in Melbourne, Australian time for this to drop. But we'll have to wait and see what goes on. Anyway, and in your part of the world, I'm unsure, but being 5 p.m. here in Australia and everyone sort of behind the time, I'd say that is going to be looking like it's a midnight premiere in most American areas. Possibly, but anyway, just double check on the Google, rock a Google. Anyway, that is the news for this time around. Let's get into views. Views is my story ideas, where I just give you an idea of a story that I have within Star Wars. And just to let you know, I accept the story for what it is, good or bad, left or right, up and down. The story of Star Wars is really a journey, an adventure in space. Whether it's great or not, it's still that adventure that we all have come familiar to know. Anyway, so because we've got more coming out again, so my story idea in this particular movie series coming out, 10 episodes, I would love to see that there's obviously this sort of Jedi, this young female Jedi, which I think is of a Twi'lek origin. Twi'lek, possibly. I don't know. Something, maybe that's her background, her actual creature background, but she's obviously a Jedi in training or a Jedi. We don't know. I think it's going to be pretty obvious, especially with some of the ads. It would be good that she goes from the good to bad, which I think that's going to happen because one of the previews, when I've just thought of it right now, has her holding the red lightsaber. I would like to see for her to become some sort of, Force user that has just turned from the good to bad, but the bad not of Sith, but the bad of just being that Maul version of bad, because Maul is now not a Sith. Just to let you know, that's a bit of a spoiler. In this timeline of Star Wars, Maul, the reason why he's called just Maul and not Darth Maul is because he's not a Sith anymore. But if you look closely, he still has the yellow Sith eyes, which I don't know what that actually means. Maybe you're stuck with them being a Sith forever, or maybe just traces of being a Sith or something like this. But the yellow eyes usually indicate that you are or becoming a Sith. But he's still got them. He's not a Sith anymore. What does that all mean? But I'd love to see this girl that's a Jedi become to the dark side. Not that I want to see people go to the dark side or aliens or droids or whatever, but it will be interesting in, sort of dynamics in how to have an apprentice, not transforming them to be a Sith Lord, but to be of the dark side in a criminal underworld thing. I think that's going to actually happen. So my story idea is something that is a little bit of a cheat from seeing the previews, but she's holding a red lightsaber. She doesn't really have any other indications at this point of being turned in any sort of way, but it would be good to see good go to bad and see how that goes. That's my story idea for this time around. That is probably the story idea of many out there. I'll just take a Middelloring pill here. A bit of a coffee. So, that is the views. My review this time around is going to be of that particular thing I mentioned in the opening, in the news. It's a documentary you can find online. It's called Would Star Wars Exist Without Marshall Lucas? It is a great documentary. I tell you, it is something that is as equal but in a different way to Empire of Dreams, but just really talking about A New Hope, the original Star Wars. The complications, the back and forth, and also the hospitalization of George Lucas towards the end of making this movie. He was in serious overload, and also explains that he was not there on the opening day in I think it was Hollywood Boulevard, where the Chinese theatre, known as the Mann's Chinese Theatre back then, he was not there. In fact, footage is of a lot of people there, but he wasn't there because he was just so stressed that he didn't want to be a part of something that may fail. What his thoughts was before, seeing the last screening of it before it went out to the public. That would be very interesting. But Marshall Lucas is the focus in this particular documentary. It slips away from her a bit towards the middle to the end from her, but it does have her consistent in this particular interview. This is a part of an interview that we got some information on what she really thought of today's Star Wars, and that was news a couple of months ago. But going away from that, focusing on the review of this thing, I give this review a 9 out of 10. It's really, really, really good. It should be a 10, but the only reason why I'm giving it a 9 is because it is something we've sort of known before, with a little bit of extra towards the end about, George Lucas being hospitalized and also going away from the premiere because he was, so stressed and did not want to be a part of something just in case it really failed. And the amount of work pressure that the original Star Wars did, and I tell you, he was up against the odds. 9 out of 10 for this documentary. Anyway, so check that out online. It's a worth watch. Anyway, so let's now get in. That was the reviews. Now we're going to get into interviews. Interviews is usually my my questions that I get from my last video that I dropped. I always ask people to send your questions, trivia, or whatever it is, comments in my last particular video, as I don't really have Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it at this stage. Just sort of keeping it real, keeping it simple. So one of our favourites, Michael from Werribee South, which is the other side of Melbourne, he loves to put his 2 cents in. Anyway, so anyone can write in, not just Michael, anyone. Anyway, so just to let you know. And while I'm at it, subscribe to the channel, The Force Always. I'm here 3-4 times a week. And next week, I'd say a little bit more because of the whole Maul series. But anyway, I'll be bringing you also a review of a film that's not Star Wars, that is Australian, midway next week. Doing a bit of review on that, but that's something separate. But let's get into the questions. Sam Witwer, voice actor technically of Maul, Witwer has noted that this era shows a confused and reassessing Maul who realizes that the mechanized empire, not the world of swords and sorcery he expected. Thoughts? Well, really, this particular series is going to be pretty much like, as I've said, CSI. But it's going to be like CSI Star Wars, not CSI Miami, not CSI LA, New York, or whatever it is. This is CSI, really, of Star Wars. And not that from a good perspective, and not from a sort of documentary style, but obviously from a dark side user, Maul, and his antics with the criminal organization, and his revenge on his former master, the Emperor Palpatine, that is. And it's going to be just filled with, action. It's going to be filled with, evil ideas from Maul. And I think, take, the world of swords and sorcery, which is sort of like what people would think with, Jedi lightsabers is, and using the Force. For me, it's not that, being swords and sorcery, but it can be described as that. It's meant to be a real crime warlord series. So that's what I'm expecting, and that's my thoughts. Anyway, let's get on to the next question from Michael from Werribee South. And anyone can ask questions, just to let you know. The next question is animation style debates. While many praise the visual intensity, some viewers on Reddit remain critical of the continued use of the Clone Wars animation style, finding it uncanny for emoting complex human faces. Thoughts? I reckon the animation style in this one is actually what it needs. It's a real rough, paint stroke sort of looking colour fills, and it's a real, grit. It makes the actual action, the storyline gritty. I think it gives a menacing sort of feel. I think it's fine. If you had it a bit more to sort of flat-based, almost like cartoon, I think it would be a bit more sort of kid-like, even though it's of, intense dark side behaviour from Maul. I think it's well suited, and I don't really go on the Reddit side of thing personally much myself. But people on Reddit have their opinions, and that's, some people don't like it, some people do. I actually think the look is good of the animation style. Anyway, the next question from Micah from Werribee South. Darker and/or like tone. Sorry, darker and/or like tone. Early reactions to Maul Shadow Lord suggest it is the darkest Star Wars animation yet, with critics on Reddit comparing its gritty, philosophical, big word there, philosophical, you know what I'm saying, philosophy, tone to Andor and The Dark Knight. Thoughts? Well, when something is usually coming out, actors or the producers or directors or will always praise it to be the best something ever, and it just happens. But in this case, it's suggesting it's the darkest ever. So look, Star Wars fans like myself are craving a real intense, dark film. Hence why I think a Darth Vader, even though I don't like going backwards, but a whole Darth Vader horror type sort of film would be amazing. But it's if it's dark, it's good. But obviously it's animation. It's on Disney Plus. You've got to think of your audience. You can't just throw things to. Kids will be watching this, whether they have parental control or not. They will be attempting to watch this. It's just one of those things. And I think I don't know if it's going to be the darkest ever yet. I think there's always in Star Wars, there's really dark moments, sometimes really big dark moments. But I think, from the colours that's used in this particular colour palette for this particular series, the aggression from Maul, that's probably going to sort of suggest that it's going to be the darkest ever. But it doesn't necessarily, it's going to be the most horrific thing ever. We're going to actually wait and see it to judge that for ourselves. Anyway, so that's my thoughts. But the next question, Dave Filoni's involvement. While his leadership is usually a draw, some skeptical fans worry his tendency to bring back the same characters makes the galaxy feel too small. Thoughts? Well, Dave Filoni, which is one half of the presidential president of Lucasfilm, there is a lovely lady that I still cannot actually get used to her name at the moment to remember. I'm surprised I remember Dave Filoni only because it was written in the question. But I think he does bring up characters from the past because, I think bringing characters that we are familiar with or not so familiar with that is been seen or heard in actual canon or even the EU or legends or whatever we want to say is important because you can't just dismiss characters just because it's too nostalgic. If the character suits the scene for whatever reason and the story needs to be told with that character in the background, the mid-ground, the foreground, whatever, I'm all for it. But I think, everyone has their opinion. Some people will say it's too nostalgic. Some people would say it's not, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. Not having those nostalgic characters or scenes or looks or whatever. But, I just think Dave Filoni has a certain style, has a certain way, and I think I think he's always done a great job in being an apprentice to George Lucas because he really sat side by side next to George Lucas a lot of times learning the whole Star Wars thing. But I think also he just needs to, if anything on my behalf, when creating a character, Star Wars is at its best when the character looks as real as possible, but with a used future look about it, which is the whole Star Wars feel. Rather than it being a bit too colourful, too over alienated, or too much charisma. Like, I think, personally, Ahsoka, when she first came out, it was just too intense. It looked almost like a clown, an alien clown. But towards the end of her being a Jedi, which is in the Clone Wars, when she walks away from the Jedi Order, spoiler there, Her look then, and being another character called Fulcrum, actually had a lot more earth tones, and it was much better. It sort of gave it a realism. And when you've got people like Finn in the sequel trilogy, 7, 8, 9, his look with his jacket, his pants, his other than being a stormtrooper, it looked good. You could buy those type of stuff and wear it out, and people will know that's Star Wars. It just looks good, but it has a Star Wars tone to it. But I think Dave Filoni just needs to sort of maybe step back a little, making things a little bit too too many shapes and colours, and just keeping it sort of, flat, but with a used future feel about it to give it that Star Wars feel. That's my opinion. That's my thoughts, as Michael was asking. Speaking of Michael's last question: character fatigue. A minority of fans express Maul fatigue, arguing that the character has already been fully explored in the Clone Wars and Rebels, and that the spotlight should move to new characters. Thoughts? Well, this is a sit on the fence type of thing answer that I could be accused of. But yes, his character has been really fully explored. We know what Maul is about, and will be about. But to have more about just getting the story, more about the story, does have interesting elements to it. Like it just sort of builds upon the knowledge of Maul and understanding. I think still going back in the past and talking about particular characters as a singular is not what Star Wars is completely great about. I mean, its episodic saga is, by far the best way to have Star Wars move forward and be really exciting. Hence, Starfighter could be, as I've said, could be, as a prediction, could be episode 10, but we don't know. Going back to the question, his character really has been explored, but there's probably some psychological aspects of him being rejected by the Emperor, and sort of being a crime lord that would be interesting, and that would be great to see. I'm not excited for the show, but I'm really anticipating the show. Like I'm it's something to look really forward to. I think this is going to be the type of show that every week we'll really want to see the next episode. But yeah, it really, it's a sit on the fence answer. He has been explored, but there's just certain points that we can get to learn. And Star Wars, in its great storytelling, is a psychological drama. Amazing. And that's one part of what I think it's great about it. Anyway, so that is the interviews. That is the show for this time around. The next time I'll probably see you will be a reaction and or review or whatever I'm going to call it. I'm unsure. But until next time, my friends, keep rocking this The Force Always. Only on YouTube. Subscribe if you like.